Let's get more now, though, on our top story, the death of the former US President Jimmy Carter at the age of 100. Let me take you to the live pictures from Washington, D.C. And there is the White House. And you can see that the flag there is flying at half-mast, just gone 7:30 in the morning, as Americans wake up to that news that Jimmy Carter has passed away. Now, he won the 1976 election, achieved diplomatic success in the Middle East, but was hampered at home by a failing economy. He later forged a career as an international statesman, winning the Nobel Peace Prize for helping eradicate diseases in some of the poorest parts of the world. Well, in 2014, President Carter spoke to the BBC's Katty. They discussed the Russian invasion of Crimea and his new book highlighting discrimination against women. But they began with the Middle East and whether the then President Barack Obama was, at that time, making enough progress towards peace.
President Carter, I want to start by asking you about the Middle East peace process. I wonder whether you think this president has been engaged enough at a personal level in the peace process. Secretary Kerry today accepted that there are limits to what he can do. He suggested you can take a horse to water, you can't force it to drink. If the president was more personally engaged, do you think we could get more progress?
I do. And not only this president, but all previous presidents. I was as deeply engaged as I could possibly get, maybe excessively so. But President Clinton made a noble effort, but he only started about the last, I think, 6 months of his administration when he was on the way out. And President Obama made a good start in Cairo when he announced that there were to be no more settlements in Palestinian territory and that the 1967 borders would prevail. That was a very wonderful start, but he backed down away from that for the next 3 years or so until John Kerry came along.
You had one of the few bright spots with the Camp David Accords in the last few decades of the Middle East peace process. Back then in 1978, would you ever have thought we would have made so little progress 35 years later?
No. I thought it was a foregone conclusion that we would have peace between Israel and Egypt permanently, which we have. Not a single word of the peace treaty has ever been violated. And I thought that we would have Palestinian rights guaranteed as well, because the entire international community agreed with that.
Has it been a failure of American policy?
Well, I wouldn't try to allege that other presidents have failed, but I know that President Reagan didn't take much interest in it. He dealt with it spasmodically, and other things were more important to him. And most of the other presidents since then have only paid brief attention to that crucial issue. So I would say that in general, but not singling out anyone, that all of the presidents could have done more to bring peace to Israel, which means that you have to bring peace to the immediate neighbors as well.
A year after the Camp David Accords, 1979, the Soviet Union invades Afghanistan.
Yes.
Again, during your presidency, there has been a lot of discussion in the last few months of whether we are returning to the Cold War with Russia's annexation of Crimea. How is this similar and how is this different?
Well, I think that the taking of Crimea by Russia was a foregone conclusion. There's nothing that the Western nations could have done to prevent Putin from moving his military forces into Crimea, because the Russians have always considered that Crimea was part of Russia when I was president and even before that. And I think about 3/4 of the Crimean people consider themselves to be part of Russia, so that was no way to change that. But I think now we have the same situation that I faced when I was in the White House in Christmas week, as a matter of fact, of 1979, when the Soviets invaded Afghanistan. I took very strong action. I withdrew my ambassador, broke diplomatic relations with Russia. I declared an embargo against Russia as well. I began to arm the freedom fighters in Afghanistan so they could repel the Russian invaders. And I announced to Brezhnev that if he went any further than he had already gone, that I would respond militarily with all the weapons that we had at our disposal. And that was the end of the Soviet invasion.
I want to ask you about your book, A Call to Action, Women, Religion, Violence and Power. It's a thesis on how women are mistreated by religions in many instances, and I think a lot of people would immediately think of Islam. But you write in the book that it's not confined to Islam, that women are subjugated in many religions around the world.
Well, I wouldn't, it's not just religions, because there are a lot of abuses of women that have nothing to do with religion. For instance, in the United States, we pay women 23% less than men for the same work. And of the Fortune 500 companies, 500, only 21 have women CEOs, and they get about 40% less than men. And sexual abuse on university campuses is rampant, and is very seldom reported by girls who are raped, or are the rapist punished. And the same thing happens in the U.S. military. So it's not just religion, but I think that sometimes the misinterpretation of religious scriptures do give some men the assured belief.
Across religions?
Across religions, yeah, across.
President Carter, you also write that this, and you have said that this is, you think, the most important book that you have written.
I don't think it, I know it. It's the most important subject that's not addressed adequately on earth. The horrendous abuse of girls and women in every country on earth is the worst crime that's being committed against humanity. And it's almost always ignored or not addressed adequately. And my hope is that this book will at least bring attention to that subject. I've just addressed this morning, as a matter of fact, a letter to all of the heads of nations in the world to send all of them a copy of the book. And I hope that within their own countries they will see we can do something about this problem.
President Carter, thank you very much for joining me.
It's a pleasure.
Jimmy Carter talking to Katty back in 2014.